Marvel virtual effects, and if you don't know, Disney owns both Marvel and the Muppets, which Rizzo's technically a puppet, but I'm sure that there are CG versions of it. Marvel VFX or virtual effects artists that do all the special effects in the movies, TV shows, etc., are taking the step towards unionization. Now, this does not mean that they have a union. This does not mean that they've been recognized as a union. This advertisement wants me to play RuneScape. Here we see Captain America, Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson. But while this is happening, remember, you can't just overnight have a union. A union has to have a vote, it has to be approved, and it has to be recognized. Now, I would imagine that this is a union that will be recognized just because of SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild, all of these existing in the ancillary pieces around the VFX workers. But I'll just read this real quick. Visual effects artists working for Marvel have taken the first step towards unionization in a notoriously poorly represented area of the film industry. According to a statement from the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, a group of on-set VFX artists employed by the studio have filed a petition with the U.S. National Labor Relations Board, which, by the way, has been doing an amazing job under Biden. That is a major step forward under the Biden administration compared to the Trump administration, and even compared to the Obama administration, where labor has been actually gaining during the Biden administration. We've seen it in a number of times. The unions and the strikes and the labor movements have been gaining power, utilizing their power to get contracts. You see Pennsylvania nurses now making moves. You see SAG-AFTRA. You saw the UPS workers. You saw the railroad workers, which, yes, the Biden administration did not do well on, but in the end, came back to give the sick pay that they needed to those workers as well. So again, that was kind of under the radar, but that is important. Now back to this real quick. Hailing the move as a major shift in an industry that has largely remained non-union since VFX was pioneered during production of the Star Wars films in the 1970s, the IATSE said a supermajority of Marvel's 50-plus VFX crew had signed authorization cards indicating they wished to be represented by the union, which already represents around 168,000 technicians and craftspeople in live theater, film, and TV and associated areas in the US and Canada. And if I'm not mistaken, former guest of the show, David McMahon, is a part of this union, I believe. I know he talks about this a lot on his social media. Maybe I'll bring him on soon enough to recap some of these actions. But for those who don't understand the impact of this, let me first say costs have been cut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and people have taken a notice because when you watch shows like maybe She-Hulk or Secret Invasion or I guess the Guardians of the Galaxy, not so much, but in other like more minor parts of the overall MCU, which we're going nerdy here, but is you've seen the budget cuts in the VFX. You've seen that the cuts come to the labor costs, which then shows as the actual production looks worse. But you might say, well, Connor, actually, Ben Shapiro, Connor, actually, if the union is in there, that means that they will raise prices for the labor to make the shows. That is right. They would raise the labor costs for the shows and the movies. That is right. Because their wages would be higher for the VFX workers. The biggest problem for virtual effects workers and the gaming industry, for that matter as well, because, you know, remember, guys, I'm a hashtag gamer, is just over grinding workers. They grind workers down and they try to just milk as much out of the workers as they possibly can just by saying, well, you guys love World of Warcraft, right? So you should be grinding 15, 16 hours a day to make this next expansion in time, which is Blizzard, Activision Blizzard. Well, you love Thor, Connor. So to have the next Thor movie come up here, you have to have all these workers grinding to make sure that Mjolnir looks right when the lightning comes off of it, which like is the most minuscule part to me about these movies. But these workers have been overworked, and the actual I just came to me, the actual terminology that they use in the gaming industry, and I'm sure the VFX industry, is called crunch. They crunch as much out of the workers. So let's just say Thor 5 is coming out, which, woohoo, that would be awesome. Would love that. But it's coming out, let's just say, in January of 2024. So from now until then, there's a deadline for these workers. These workers are not paid significantly, or if at all necessarily, overtime for the work that they're performing. Again, this is why a union is necessary to actually protect the health conditions, the working conditions, the salary, and the benefits. And the benefits could be from retirement to residual work, which again, that's more on the actor's side, but I think the VFX side is you can make an argument as well, because you are creating intellectual property for a company that then that company owns. So at least getting a portion of that. Now that might be way out there, but in my opinion, I don't think so. I think that that's something that is a reasonable ask, especially when you're raking in billions of dollars off of the IP. But these are all things that, okay, between now and January, yeah, you got to get this stuff done. But if you had a union, you would at least be able to control some portion of how many hours somebody's working. And I mean, the union would be able to control this, not the business coercing people into doing it. You'd be able to control how much overtime you're getting paid for those hours that are considered necessary for the crunch. You would be able to have health care for times that you do not feel well. If you feel sick, or if you need to take sick days, you would have 6 days. You would have PTO. You would have this stuff built in. And remember, sometimes when these movies wrap, they close the studios. In reaction to people talking about crunch, I brought up She-Hulk, I brought up Secret Invasion. Secret Invasion less so, but I remember when She-Hulk was coming out, people talked about, oh, it looks horrible, it looks like Shrek. Well, it kind of does. It kind of does. Like, I'm not going to lie, right? I'm not going to lie and say it didn't. I like the show, but sometimes, or Black Panther. Black Panther was a great movie, in my opinion, but the effects in, like, some of the fights where, like, T'Challa's fighting Killmonger, it doesn't look good. It just didn't look right, okay? Those are like my nitpicks. But the reason is that when this crunch comes out and they cut the budget, it's not like it's just like, oh, well, now it's going to get miraculously better. No, it's like, that's just what it is. Like, you're not going to get better product by cutting costs. That's just not the case. This is why when they're going to start to move towards, I'm sure that this is probably a concern for the VFX team too, when they start trying to automate effects and they try to automate, characters and designs, these things don't look right. You can tell AI generated art a lot of the time. It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. At least a human is designing the virtual effects and the graphics in some of these movies still. And I think that they deserve to have the right to unionize, because they are putting out and creating moments in cinematic history, I'll just say that will last a very, very long time. I mean, if you just think about Avengers Endgame becoming, I think it's the most popular movie in the theater of all time. I think it surpassed Avatar. But which, by the way, if you think Avatar is a good movie, that should be at the top of that list. Like, I think we should have a conversation because that movie is not that good in my opinion. But Avengers Endgame was like a gigantic, colossal Hollywood event like that tons and tons of people went to the theater to see. And so much of that film was made possible by these workers. That's not to take away from, the big stars that are the actors in the show or the movies. But so much of the magic that happens on the screen is made by these people, and they deserve to have the same rights and protections as many other people in the industry have, like the writers, like the actors. And by the way, those actors and writers deserve to have better representation, or they are using their representation and their leverage to gain what is theirs rightfully. So I believe this is a good move, and I hope to see that this union comes to fruition.